Over 5 decades of affirmative action, ethnic Chinese entrepreneurship have been well adapted to local culture and the changing politics and economic policy, though they have lost their dominance in some of the traditional economic sectors, but they are emerging as important players in the technology sector. 6 assessments of Chinese entrepreneurship in Malaysia may be made. First, Chinese entrepreneurs were resilient as they were able to seize opportunities in the initial period of the affirmative action policy and right through the storm of a world economic recession that hit Malaysia in the mid-1980s. In the extent of accelerated economic growth before the Asian financial crisis, Chinese entrepreneurs responded well to the affirmative action policy. A new and young generation of Chinese capitalists has emerged during the NEP and post-NEP decades. This accomplished largely by co-opting political, well-connected Malays into their cooperation. Many family-based Chinese businesses were transformed into Sino-Malay business alliances in a structural shift that became increasingly evident at the corporate level during the 1990s. Between 1997 and the present, the Asian financial crisis and the incessant march of affirmative action policy have continued to pose challenges to Chinese entrepreneurship in Malaysia. Second, the existence of Chinese business networks, especially in the wholesale and retail sectors, was sufficiently durable to withstand external competition. However, vigorous state-sponsored entrepreneurial programs in the past 5 decades have created a significant presence of Bumiputera interests in the wholesale and retail trade. State power has broken the once Chinese dominant wholesale and retail sectors. Third, in the absence of Malay business class, Chinese entrepreneurs remain indispensable in the country's economic development. The 1970s and 1980s had witnessed the flourishing of Alibaba alliances, especially in the construction and transportation sectors. To tap into state legacies extended to Malays, in the 1990s, Chinese enterprises that participated in inter-ethnic partnership managed to gain access to state-owned funds to expand their businesses. The economic transformations of Malay society is accompanied by a class of Malay contractors who are able to undertake large-scale state-funded and private projects. Under the NEM, the state aims to integrate the successful Bumiputera firms and GLCs with national supply chains as well as globally connected and competitive supply chains as a strategy to improve the overall performance of the BCIC. The dominant presence of GLC has stifled entrepreneurship of the Chinese and also the smaller Bumiputera enterprises. Fourth, over the years, 12 of the 14 Chinese-owned commercial banks in Malaysia have disappeared from the corporate scene, either through state-led consolidation exercises or hostile takeover by GLCs. The early Chinese control bank had accumulated their capital from fortunes acquired in the rubber and tin industries. They had helped to fund the expansion of Chinese-owned industrial and property development and new startups. Today, Chinese control banks have been reduced to 2, namely Public Bank and Hong Leong Bank. From the perspective of power theory, Both banks are well managed and on a scale that renders them difficult targets for takeover bids. Today, these two banks have a noteworthy presence in Southeast Asia. Future banking consolidation that favors state-controlled banks will see the remaining Chinese-owned bank exiting the corporate scene. Fifth, the presence of multinational corporation or MNC in the 1990s created opportunities for the Chinese to exploit their entrepreneurial skill in the technology sector. Chinese technopreneurs had emerged in the late 1980s serving as contract manufacturers to the MNCs. The success of this technology firm indicates that given the opportunities, Chinese enterprises will thrive on their entrepreneurship as they strive to compete and occupy the niche in the global supply chain as original equipment manufacturers or OEM and move into design and development in the constant movement up the value chain. Several of these Chinese-owned companies have initiated offshore operation in Southeast Asia and even further afield. Sixth, in the face of increasing competitive pressure in the limited domestic economy, coupled with the growing appetite of GLCs, state-backed investment institutions, and large foreign enterprises, prospects for small business survival deteriorated.